This question popped up on a video about how to create drop-down list parameters in reporting services, and what Philip wanted to know was how to use parameters to control the visibility of columns in a table. So we've got several different ways we can do that. I've created a quick basic report just to demonstrate the three techniques we're going to look at in this video. So technique number one actually doesn't rely on parameters at all. So this blue table up at the top here can be controlled just by clicking on text boxes in the report page. So if I click the toggle runtime text box, that hides the runtime column in the table, and clicking the same text box again brings it back. We can use a single text box to control multiple columns at the same time, so I can toggle both the budget and box office columns, and I can use any combination of columns I like by clicking the individual toggle buttons. Now, as well as using basic text boxes, I guess the disadvantage of this is that it occupies space on the report page. We can also use a different set of parameters. So here at the top left-hand corner, I've got some true-false Boolean parameters to toggle the individual columns and combinations of columns. So when I select some options here, I then have to hit the View Report button to control the columns visible in the middle table on the report page. Again, I can bring those back quite happily by changing the options and then viewing the report again. Finally, I've got a single parameter solution here with a drop-down list that allows me to select multiple values. So once again, I can choose the options I want to see in my table this time. So I'm going to go for the release date and the money columns, and viewing the report will affect the third table in the list. And of course, I can bring everything back again and then hit View Report. So we'll have a quick look at how to make all those three options work, starting with the basic text box toggle system. So I've created the basic report that we'll need. I've got a data source pointing to our standard movies database, and then a data set which shows the 5 most successful films based on Oscar wins. Just in case you want to use the same dataset that I'm using here, that's the query that I've created. But it doesn't really matter what dataset you choose to use for this video, as long as you can create a table that contains a few columns you can choose to show and hide. So I created one version of that table and applied some basic formatting to it, and then copied and pasted it twice, changed a bit of basic formatting so that we can demonstrate the 3 different techniques in 3 different tables. So at the moment, if I run the report, that's the output you should see. We'll start by looking at how to hide a column in a table manually. This is mainly so that I can show you how to control whether when you hide a column, it keeps the space occupied by the column, or whether that space is collapsed. So we'll deal with the release date column in the first table in the report page. Let's head back to the design view, and the first thing I'll do is click into any cell in the table and then click on the little grey box at the top of the release date column to select all the cells in that column. Now I'm going to use the properties window on the right hand side. If I scroll all the way down to the very bottom, we should find the hidden property sitting down there. So it's set to false at the moment, which means it's not hidden, it's visible. If I set the hidden property to true and then run the report again, we can see that this time, indeed, all the cells in that column are no longer visible, but you can see the space occupied by the column, by all those cells, is still there. It's still rendered. I think that looks a little odd personally. I prefer to collapse the white space when I hide a column. So to demonstrate how that works, let's head back to the design view. And I'm going to select the same column again in the table, and I'm going to change the hidden property back to false so it becomes visible again. So back to normal. Now back in the design view, I don't want to select the physical cells in the table. I want to select the group, or the column group, that's associated with those cells in the table. Now at the moment in the groups panel, I can't actually see the item that I need to select. So you'll need to switch the grouping panel into advanced mode using this tiny little drop down arrow in the top right hand corner there. So I need to click on that and choose advanced mode. And then you can hopefully see that each column, each physical column in the table object has a corresponding static item sitting in the groups panel. So if I select the individual static items, you can see that it selects the corresponding cell associated with that column in the table at the top. So I've selected the static item that corresponds to the release date column, and hopefully again you can see over here in the properties window that we've got a hidden property. It's currently set to false, so I'm going to change that and set it to true, and then if I run the report again, we should see that the column is now no longer visible, and it's also collapsed the space taken up by that table group. Next, I'd like to be able to change the value of the hidden property for that static column group by clicking on a physical text box sitting on the report page. So back in the design view, I'm going to select the static column item corresponding to the release date column, and then I'm going to set its hidden property back to false, so that when I run the report, the release date column will be visible. Now you'll notice the property sitting immediately below hidden there says toggle item. That allows me to refer to any text box in the report that I can then click on to toggle the visibility, or the hidden property I should say. So let's draw a basic text box. I'll position it roughly above the release date column. I'll let you deal with the nicer formatting. I'll just add a basic text box and I'll type in some simple text. Let's say toggle date or something along those lines. I'll just apply some very basic formatting to it. Maybe just change the font so I'll actually be able to read what I've typed in and switch it back. And then if I just change the background color there, I also want to modify the name of the text box to make it easier to reference in a moment. So with the text box selected, I can find its name property in the properties window. Textbox 22 is a pretty rubbish name. Let's call this one something like release date toggle. Names can't have spaces in them, so make sure you don't type in any spaces when you change the name of your text box. Okay, so at the moment if I run the report, I've just got that basic text box sitting above the release date column. Now heading back to the design view, I'm going to select any cell in that table, highlight the static column group item that corresponds to the column in the table, find the toggle item property, and then change the toggle item property to the thing I've just created. So that was called release date toggle, sitting all the way down there at the bottom of the list. So now that I've done that, I can run the report and we'll see that that text box gains a little plus symbol. If I click the plus symbol, you'll see that that hides the release date column. It switches the plus symbol to a minus symbol. I can then click on the minus symbol to bring the release date column back. Now if you think that probably is working the wrong way round, we can easily flip that so that when the text box first appears, it shows the minus symbol instead. Let's head back to the design view and I'll select my text box. I'm going to head down towards the bottom of the properties window and find the initial toggle state property. So it's the second one from the bottom there. So it's currently set to false. I'm going to set that one to true instead. And then if I run the report again, you can see the text box has a minus symbol in by default. If I click on the minus symbol, it hides the column and switches to a plus. And then I can click it again to bring the release date column back. You can use a single text box to control the visibility of multiple columns. So let's create a toggle for the budget and box office columns. I'm going to head back to the design view and then I'm going to just copy and paste the existing text box actually. Let's just quickly select and then copy and paste it. And then I'll change the text in that text box to say something like toggle money. And then of course I want to change its name so it's easy to identify. Let's call this one money toggle. And then get rid of the number 2 at the end. And then selecting the table that I want to toggle the visibility of its columns of, I need to identify the budget and the box office columns. Now it'd be really nice if I could select more than one static item at the same time, but sadly I can't. I have to do this one thing at a time. So I've selected a static item for the budget column and I can set its toggle item to be the money toggle. Then I can select the box office column or static column group and then set its toggle item to be the money toggle as well. So having done that, if I run the report, we'll see that I can toggle both the budget and the box office by clicking on a single text box. So we could easily create more text boxes to control the other columns in this table, but that's fairly straightforward to do. So let's move on and have a look at how we can start using parameters to do the same thing. We'll begin by creating a parameter that we'll use to control the visibility of the release date column in the second table. Let's just deal with creating that parameter to start with. If we head back to the design view, we can add a new parameter to the report either by right-clicking the parameters folder in the report data window and choosing add parameter, or by right-clicking into a cell in the parameters grid and choosing add parameter there. I'm going to create my first parameter, which I'm going to call hide release date. And then the prompt is going to be something quite similar, hide release date, but in the prompt I'm allowed to put in spaces and punctuation characters, etc. I'm going to set the data type of that parameter to Boolean, which means it can accept a value of either true or false. And when I first run the report, I want the value of this parameter to be set to false, so that the release date column will not be hidden. So we can head over to the default values page on the left-hand side, choose specify values, click the add button and then type in the value of false. Now at the moment, if I click OK, this parameter doesn't have any influence over the release date column yet, but just to demonstrate what it looks like when we run the report, we should see that the hide release date parameter has appeared, and I can switch between true and false and then click the view report button to pass that value back to the report. Next, I'd like to set the value for the hidden property of that release date column by referring to the value of our parameter. So to do that, we can head back to the design view. We'll select any single cell in that second table and then find the static column group item which corresponds to the release date column. Now that we've done that, we can head over to the properties window and find the hidden property. And clicking on the drop down arrow, rather than manually selecting either true or false, we're going to choose expression instead, which will launch the expression builder. Let's just get rid of the value of false that's in there already. And then in the bottom half of the dialog box, we can head to the parameters category on the left hand side and then simply double click on the value of that parameter. So it will read the parameters hide release date dot value. So whichever value I've selected here will be fed into the hidden property when I run the report. So if I click OK and then run the report again, when the report first runs, the default value is false. If I change it to true and then hit the view report button again, we can see that the release date column now disappears. We can use this same technique to control the visibility of multiple columns, just as we did with the text box toggle earlier on. Just to demonstrate that, let's head back to the design view. And I'm going to create a new parameter by adding a new parameter to the parameters grid. Let's call this one hide money. And then I'll change the prompt to say something similar, hide money. And then I'll change the data type to say Boolean. And then on the default values page, I'll specify a value of false. I can then click OK to create that parameter. And then to reference that parameter in an expression, I need to select the second table, identify the columns which contain the budget and the box office. And again, slightly annoyingly, I have to do this one column at a time. I can head over to the hidden property in the properties window, choose expression, and then in the expression builder, get rid of whatever's already there. Head to the parameters category and then double click the hide money parameter. I can click OK and then select the next static item, which is for the box office column. Change the hidden property by choosing an expression, get rid of the value false, and then in the parameters section, double click the hide money parameter. I can then click OK and then run the report. And now I can control both the budget and the box office column with a single Boolean parameter. So again, we could just carry on adding more Boolean parameters to control the visibility of the other columns of the table. But let's move on and have a look at how we can create this single drop-down list to control all the columns in the final table in the report. So I'm going to create a drop-down list that's populated with 4 different rows. It's going to have the option to choose release date and run time separately, and then money, which combines the budget and box office columns, and awards to combine the nominations and wins. Let's just set up the basic drop-down list first. If we head back to the design view, I'm going to find a new blank cell in the parameters grid at the top and choose to add a new parameter to it. I'm going to call this one show selected columns or something along those lines. And then the prompt will be something similar, but with spaces, making it a bit more readable. The data type of this is going to be text, and I want to allow multiple values. And then to set those multiple values, I'm going to head to the available values page and choose to specify values. I'm going to add in 4 different options, so I'll click the add button 4 times. And I've got 2 things to fill in for each option, a label and a value. So the label is what the end user will see shown displayed in the drop-down list, while the value is what value is returned when the user clicks the view report button. So for the label, I'm going to make these nice and descriptive. The first one's going to be release date with a space. Then for the value, this is going to be quite short. I'm going to make it equal to the letters RD. It doesn't really matter what you use here, as long as you can reference this piece of information in the expressions we'll write a little later on. So I'm making these nice and short to make my life easier, basically. Then for the release date, for the second one, we call this one runtime for the label, and then the value can be RT. And then the third label can be money. And let's just use the same word there. Let's use money for the value, and then awards. And again, we'll use the same value there, awards. So we've got RD, RT, money, and awards. Now I'd like to make sure that when we first run the report, all of these values are selected in the drop-down list. So we can head over to the default values page and choose to specify values. And then once again, I'm going to assign 4 options to this. And for each one of those options, we can just select the individual items. Notice you're selecting by value, not by label, but it's the label that will be displayed to the end user. So having done that, if I click OK and then run the report, we should have our basic drop-down list set up. If I click on the drop-down list when the report's first loaded, everything is selected, but I can now optionally pick and choose which ones I want. Next, we need a way to check whether an item in this drop-down list has been selected or not. And to explain what's going on in the background here, I'm going to use a basic text box to show the results of a couple of expressions we'll write. So I'm going to go back to the design view, and in a blank space somewhere in the report, I'm going to choose to insert a text box. I'm going to right click into that text box and choose expression. And I'm going to begin by using the array.indexOf function. Now this is a function you may not have encountered before. It's a Visual Basic.NET function, and what it allows you to do is search within an array for a particular item, and then the function will tell you the position at which that item has been found. So bear with it, this is just the first step. So there are 2 parameters we need to pass a value to. So if I open up some round brackets, the first parameter is the array of values that you're looking in. Now when you have multi-value parameters, when you hit the show report button, it returns an array of selected items. So if I go to the parameters category here, and I click or double click the show selected columns parameter, this returns a reference to, you might be able to make out just here at the end, it's tried to return a reference to the first item in the array returned. So that set of round brackets and the digit 0 is trying to give you back the first item from that array. I don't want a single item from the array, I want the entire thing. So I'm going to get rid of the parentheses and the 0 there to refer to the value of the entire parameter. Okay, now that I've done that, I can type in a comma, and then I need to specify the item I'm trying to look for in that array of values. So let's try to find whether we've selected the runtime field. In some double quotes, I'm going to type in the value that I assigned to the runtime item in that drop-down list. So I just use the letters RT. So in some double quotes, RT. Then I can close the round brackets and then hit OK. I might just need to fiddle around with the formatting of the font here to make sure we can actually read what I've produced. But if I head back to run the report at this point, you can see that when we first run it, because all of the items have been selected, runtime has been selected there. So it's showing me that runtime is item number 1 in the list of selected items. Arrays in reporting services are based from 0. So release date will be 0, runtime 1, money 2, and awards 3. Now if I don't have runtime checked, but I click view report again, you'll see this time the result returns -1. So whenever the item is not selected, you get -1. If I just remove the release date and check runtime, you can see now because runtime is the first item that's been selected, it should have an index of 0. So basically, as long as the index of that item is not less than 0, we know that it's been returned, then we know that we've selected that particular column. Now of course the hidden property of our columns requires a true or false value, so let's just modify the expression so that it returns true if we have selected runtime in this drop-down list. So heading back to the design view, I can right click on the expression text box again and choose expression, and if I want to know if I have selected the item, I can simply write greater than or equal to 0 at the end of that expression. So as long as the number returned is 0 or more, then I know that I've selected it. So if I click OK and then run the report, and then you can see hopefully at the moment, because runtime is selected, it's showing true, and that's whether runtime is the only or the first. As long as it is selected, it returns true. If I uncheck runtime, then it means that I get false instead. Now the slight downside to this is that I got the logic the wrong way round, because the hidden property should be set to false when we do want to display the item. So I want it to return false when I do have the runtime selected. I've got a couple of options for doing that. Probably the simplest, if I head back to the design view, I can modify the expression and simply change my logic to say less than 0. If I now click OK and then run the report, I can see that when I've got runtime selected, the hidden value is now false. When I don't have runtime selected, the hidden value is now true. So now we just need to take the expression that we've written and apply that to the hidden property for the appropriate column in the table. So let's head back to the design view, and I'm just going to right click on that text box and choose expression, and then just copy the entire thing. I can then click OK, and then I'll select the third table. I need to identify the appropriate column, so that was the runtime column, select the static item corresponding to that, and then head to the hidden property in the properties window and head to the expression option there. Then we can just paste in the expression we've written, so I'm testing for the runtime, and then click OK. While we're here, let's just do the same thing for the release date column as well. So I'll identify the static item for release date, and then head to the hidden property, set the expression by pasting in what I've just copied, and then I can just change the value that I'm testing for here to RD rather than RT. So remember, we assigned the letters RD to the value of the runtime item in that drop-down list. In a very similar way, we can then find the budget and box office columns and just do exactly the same thing. We might as well do this now we've started, and we assign the value of money to the budget and box office columns. So now I've done that, let's just quickly recopy it and then select the next static item, change the expression for that one to do the same thing. And then the final two columns, nominations and wins, had the value of awards. So let's just quickly change the expression for those, change money to awards, just quickly recopy it, and then the final column we should be able to select or assign the same expression. Okay, so we've got an expression assigned to the hidden property of each of those column groups. That's perfect. So when we run the report, we should see all of the columns still remain visible in that final table. But if we head to the drop-down list and we deselect, say, the money section and the release date column, we can click View Report again, and those will be hidden. So it all looks like it's working pretty well, showing the list of columns that we've got selected. So there we go, there's a few different ways of toggling the visibility of columns in a table, either using text boxes, single Boolean parameters, or multi-value drop-down list parameters. So hopefully you can pick the option you like the best, and hopefully one of those options is what Philip wanted initially. Thanks very much for watching, see you next time.